Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
By the way, and while I remember, thank you, because with last week's show we hit our drum roll please, 500,000th, 1/2 millionth download. Doesn't sound right, does it? 1/2 millionth download. That's better. Although the 1 million sounded quite nice, didn't it? These shows have been listened to 500,000 times, which I know somebody like Joe Rogan would probably emit a hollow chuckle to, because he gets that before he gets out of bed with every single cast that he makes. But for little old us, that makes me really proud. And I'm going to ask you a favour at the end of today's show, if I can remember. It'll be something along the lines of sharing. So if I do forget, perhaps you can fill in the gaps. Because you did this. You did this. So where are we today? I'm walking at a place called Saddleback Farm. Well, it's California Farm on Saddleback. Too much information, Neil. Yeah, I appreciate that. But that's where I am. Not far from home. About, 8-9 miles from home. It's a glorious sunny day. The blue skies. Oh, look at these. But it is very windy. So you will, and I'm going to walk through some woods, so you're going to hear leaves. But that's not a bad recording. That's not white noise through bad recording methods. That's actually leaves. So, well, because we're talking about street shooting today, I watched a YouTube film yesterday evening. Actually, I got lost down a rabbit hole. A whole rabbit warren, actually, of them. It was what happens when bombastic photographers get overzealous, running up to people and firing off frames in their face. Right up to them. 24 millimeter, couldn't be, or 16 millimeter, couldn't get any closer. And then they're met by, less than favourable reactions from the poor, and I'm using this word purposefully, the poor victims of their camera assault. Yes. So it seemed to me that photographers, there's some beautiful red kites. You're huge. Stop circling me, you make me feel nervous. I'm not intending on falling over. There's a restaurant just down at Saddleback. I'm not ready to go yet. Go on, clear off. It seemed to me that photographers who act this way are not out to make important street pictures. They're trying to be, reasonably disagreeable photocopies of Doogie Wallace or Bruce Gilden. Now, some of you might say, well, Neil, it's important to have reasonably disagreeable photocopies of Doogie Wallace or Bruce Gilden, as what will we have when those two eventually hang up their cameras? True, yes. But I was struck at how little subtlety they failed to exude through their picture making. But I did, however, whilst I was watching all this unfolding before my eyes, thinking, oh, please, that's not the way all photographers act. I did, however, find, and I shall link to it, a film featuring Richard Bram, who's a London street photographer. And he talked about the significant gesture in street photography, or street photographing. And he made the point that he looks for people in conversation, or often if they're stood together, interacting, watching their movements, simple gestures, or as per a photograph that he shows, which really brings this home, because they don't have to be grand gestures. As he says, there's a picture on the underground, the tube, the subway, in some languages, of course, where there's a girl reading her text messages, and to her left is an older gent who's sort of leaning across slightly, very surreptitiously reading her text messages. She's completely oblivious to it. How rude can you get, huh? That's the kind of gestures that he's talking about. Subtle gestures, something that draws you into an image because there's something more intuitively interesting and guiding than a picture of somebody being, essentially pounced on by an overzealous, I could do what I like street photographer. So in this show, then, we're going to return to hear the remaining part of my interview in between your letters and pictures with French documentary street photographer, author and mentor, no less, Valerie Jardin, who has a thing or two to say about respect.
Today on the Photowalk.
There are just too many disrespectful street photographers out there that are giving the genre a really bad rep.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because it is so important. I mean, if we don't document everyday life in a beautiful way, and I'm not saying beautiful, it doesn't have to be all people kissing, but I mean in a respectful way, we won't have anything of this era left other than selfies of people, or we'll have surveillance footage.
Well, it's the photography podcast where we walk together on a photo walk. Just you, just me, our cameras, a clutch of letters, thoughts and inspirations and ideas from the mailbag, and of course a special guest, one Valerie Jardin. We'll also dip into some of the DMs you sent, and we'll see what's being said in the Facebook group, which you're very welcome to become a part of, plus inspiration today from former guests. Darren Zamet-Lupi recounts the powerful pictures and story he made of his daughter Bex as she underwent treatment for a rare form of bone cancer. An Italian living in Mexico, Dennis Berti, on reinvention, and Michel Del Sol, a Frenchman in America, talking about the customs of bath time in Japan. And he should know, he photographs it. I'll tell you more about the other stories featuring today in a moment, but first I want to tip my hat to a company and supporter that's so precious to this podcast. We're supported by our friends at MPB, the number one platform in the UK, US and Europe when it comes to buying, trading or selling quality used kit online. A picture, a moment can change the way we feel. It can change how we see ourselves. It changes our understanding, and it changes the rules sometimes. It can even provoke and change history. And mpb.com, they put photo and video kit into more hands, more sustainably, helping you to change your kit to tell your stories. Go to mpb.com. Buy, sell, trade and create. We're also supported, handheld, definitely, and produced because our patrons help guide the direction of this show by those who subscribe to the Patreon channel. And I'll tell you more about that later on. So, what is also on the show, alongside, of course, our amazing guest, Valerie Jardin? Well, we talk about finding the confidence to say, can I take your picture, please? We talk about training and flexing your creative muscles. Facebook fell over earlier this week, did you notice? A glancing mention then to one of the biggest world tech stories. We talk the power of photographing new places. And would you trust yourself to venture out with one of the world's most sought-after lenses? We hear about Japanese haiku, very cultural today. We talk Insta. And as a bonus, how to survive the crowds at IKEA, courtesy of advice from Denmark land. Oh, and another bonus right at the close, something daft I managed to do out on the walk today. So, shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi is packed? Check. Boots on? Check. Long socks to avoid those nasties in the undergrowth? Check. Spare batteries, cards and film? Yes, definitely check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off? We're ready to walk. I think for another week, I'm going to use my 12mm lens today so I can see the world at a slightly wider way. And before I read out any emails and get to your thoughts from this week's mailbag, which you've been wonderful, by the way, sending stuff in for, I'm going to pop you in my pocket and get a picture of, because I have to put the mic, for new listeners, I have to put the microphone in the pocket so I can still talk to you while I'm making a picture and describing what I'm doing. So now, it's not quite winter. It's reasonably warm today. What are we, 14, 15 degrees it says? Well, not in the wind, it doesn't feel like that at all. So I've got a sort of light jacket on, but it doesn't have a pocket that I can pop a microphone into. But I found the other day the wallet that you take when you go through airports. You take a wallet with you so you can put your money and passport and stuff in, and it was perfect for holding a microphone. And it's got an adjustable strap to go around the neck. So I thought, there we go. There's my microphone holder. So let me pop you in that pocket, or the microphone holder, and make there we go, and make the first image of the day. And it's going to be, I'm using the wide angle just for another week, the 12mm, as I say. And I'm using the X Pro 1, my Fujifilm X Pro 1. And the light is just, I'm in a sort of wooded area with a horsefly buzzing around, go away, buzzing around my head there. And there's just two trees here that are being kissed by the light, and then the light just falls right off and the wood becomes very dark behind it. So 500th of a second, ISO 400, f8, and there we go. I think that's, you normally take 2, Neil. No, I'm trusting myself on 1. Let's take you out of my pocket. Right. So can I just say, and I should have done this last week, what a wonderful first month of the Community 365 feature. In case you don't know what it is, and you're new to these parts, new to this podcast, so nice to welcome you along. Then we've built it's on the website that goes with this podcast, photographydaily.show. Up the top you'll find a menu item that says Community 365, and we've built it. It's I suppose the daily in the photography. No, it is. It's the daily in the photography daily, and it's designed so that if you've ever thought of doing a 365 or wanted to, but thought, I'm not quite sure I can do that every single day, then this takes that pressure off. You only have to send a few images in, as many as you like, to be honest. There's quite a few. There's 1 or 2 of you rather sending in a few images to be used, which is fantastic. I might get to a stage where I might have to have 2 or 3 on a day. I don't know yet, but we're doing okay at the moment. 1 a day, and you can send your pictures in. But one of our fab patrons, who is such a strong supporter of the show, Lynn Fraser, was featured on Wednesday with that incredible Wednesday just gone with that incredible mixture of reds and purples and blues in this lenticular cloud picture above Inverness, a picture she called for reasons that will become very, very clear if you go to the website and look at it. The Scream. What, Neil, I hear you ask, is a lenticular cloud? I shall tell you. It's a cloud that's, now I had to sort of dip back into my aviation training for this. Otherwise I wouldn't have known. I'd have known as much about clouds as I do about trees. But it's often called a flying saucer. And they form sort of, now I didn't write this bit down, so I'm remembering this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's either between, where is the troposphere? It's between, is it between 5 and 10, or the other numbers are 6 and 12, or is it 6 and 14? Look, it's roughly about 5-6 miles up this lenticular cloud, and it's a beautiful swirly shaped cloud. And Lynn's caught this late evening sun doing its thing to throw some colour into the mix, and it's what a beautiful image, and very worthy of being in the 365 feature. Although you don't have to have these big sort of very grand vista type images. We've had some images made of everyday objects as well, because that's a 365. It follows your life, doesn't it? But Lynn came up with a suggestion that regardless of whether you write something about the scene, because you don't have to send me reams of information, a lot of people have, and I'm really grateful when you do, because it adds some fantastic context to the pictures that you send in. But you don't have to. The pictures can talk for themselves just as happily. But if you can remember when you send these in, 2,000 pixels on the wide side, please, and no watermarking on these ones. I'm happy to put links in there to your Instagram and your website, etc. But we're trying to keep it a watermark-free gallery. Otherwise, it becomes all a bit, just a bit complex in the way that it looks. Yeah, Lynn said, why not send in the geography, where you took the picture? Because that will enable us to have a sort of, I suppose, a pin in a map on the feature across a year where all these pictures are being made. So great suggestion. Lynn, thank you. For those that have sent pictures in that are still to be posted who haven't sent in geographical reference, no worries at all. But if you can remember to do it from now on, that would be fantastic. And go look at Lynn's massive, wonderful Scream shot. Also, there's another way. So that's one way to get involved in the show. Another way is to join our amazing Facebook group. Come on in, the water's warm, as I said last week with a cliche. And there's some fantastic pieces in there and fantastic discussion points. And Michael Dries, I want to give a mention to Michael Dries, following last week's episode, number 262, talking about mindfulness and gratitude and street. It was quite a lot in one sentence, I know, as a title. But Michael posted on there, and I want to read it to you. I used to be an introvert that stuck to landscape and nature images. I still enjoy those genres, but as I develop as a photographer, I'm increasingly drawn to people. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and began engaging with strangers in conversation during my travels. And this process naturally led to asking for a portrait. I soon realised that 90% of those I asked were delighted to be photographed. And these images have become cherished souvenirs. And the recent episode really enforced these values. One of my favourite episodes, Michael said. And he followed it with a portrait that he's just made yesterday. He says, "This is the portrait. I had a logger take down a few threatening trees on my property, and of course I asked him for a portrait. Sometimes your subjects are literally in your backyard." I'm not quite sure what you mean about threatening trees, though. What do you mean they're like the Whomping Willow in the Harry Potter story, or do they talk to you? "Michael, come near us with that axe. You're going to have serious troubles." I don't know. Is that what you mean by threatening? You know, it's really interesting, this street portrait business. And again, of course, we have the superb street photographer Valerie Jardin back to close the interview that I recorded with her. We had one part last week and we've got 2 chapters worth today. But it is interesting to push yourself, isn't it? Making these street portraits, doing things that you didn't think you were capable of doing before or were nervous of doing before. Because I think asking for a street portrait is, well, you're flexing a photographic muscle, aren't you? You might not feel comfortable about it to start with, but after you've asked a few folk, you'll find that, well, as Michael found out, that invariably 9 out of 10 people say, yeah, why not? I'd love to do that. And it reminds me about doing Vox Pops when I was a young journalist. A young journalist? You were young once, Neil? Yes, and I had hair. Is a prior to finding out how good Garibaldi biscuits are and building up a little bit of weight thereof. Garibaldi biscuits are my weakness, as you know. But yeah, I used to be sent out to do the Vox Pops. So, you know, back in the newsroom, radio newsroom, the old hacks and the journos wouldn't want to go out. They'd be very happy drinking their cups of coffee laced with as much scotch as they could possibly buy. So they would send the young journos out to do the Vox Pops, where you go onto the street with a microphone and go and ask questions. You know, it's usually politics or something local going on, and most people, you know, you'd approach would say, yeah, they'd have something to say. But occasionally somebody would say, no, thank you, walk on by, as if you were selling them double glazing or something. But on the whole, after a while, it is like a muscle. And at first, I used to dread the being asked to go out and do a Vox Pop. But in the end, it was, all right, well, give me the tape and off I go. And I guess street portraiture is very, very similar. So that was in the Facebook group. And then returning to Lynn, but this time she was, see, do you like how I did that, Lynn? We started with you, we ended with you. It's like bit of planning there. But going back to Lynn Fraser, she was in the Facebook group as well with another post on an entirely different matter. And I want to play some inspirational words in a second's time from a photographer that Lynn talked about. She wrote, "I hope this is okay to post," says Lynn, "but I'm hoping it is, because Darren Zammit-Loopy's interview last year was an extremely powerful one." Now, let me provide some context for this. Darren Zammit-Loopy is a Reuters photographer based out in Malta. Well, he's Maltese, but he's based in Malta, works the Med, that area. And he posted a story about his, a photo story, a very personal photo story, about his daughter Rebecca, who'd been diagnosed with an extremely rare form of bone cancer. And he made this photo story that then appeared on the Reuters feed. And it was a beautifully made story, but I'll come back. I mean, beautiful. I'm not sure whether beautiful is the correct word there, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But Lynn goes on to say, that, of course, we brought the tragic news in January this year. So Darren's original interview was in 2020, near the start of this podcast, actually. And then in January this year, at the start of the year, sadly, Bex passed away. But Darren is raising funds to build a secondary school in Ethiopia. Now, as a photographer, he's been involved in fundraising for particular causes like this. I think practically all of his professional life, I think from what I can gather, well, certainly of late. And he's going to name this secondary school after his daughter Bex. And although there's a figure shown on the fundraising page, Darren says he's going to raise this, and when he reaches the current target, I don't know if he's going to have to match it, because I was looking at the fundraising figure last night, and people have been so generous, they really have. But Lynn says, I've contributed and thought that other members of the PD community may also wish to. So that was the story. That was Darren Zamet-Lupi. He came on the show to talk about this incredibly important and potent, moving, emotional story, that photo story that he had made of his daughter Bex as she battled with this form of rare form of bone cancer that she had. And the pictures that he made across that period, and we included some on the show page with that episode, and I'll link to that episode, features one particular image, and I suspect you could probably call it the signature image of the entire story. It's of Bex bathed in this blue light on her hospital bed. It's such an artistic picture, and it's an important picture because it features her with a shaved head. Imagine making these pictures during treatment and some of the scariest moments, and do it with poise and dignity. And Bex, she made these photos with her father. It wasn't father making pictures of her. It wasn't father making a photo story for Reuters. It was father making a photo story with his daughter that then appeared within the website pages of Reuters. So as a photographer, as a father, I don't know. Would I be able to make these pictures? I don't know. But look, I'd like to hear a little from Darren. I'll link to that episode as he talks about Bex and her complete fortitude and courage during that time.
Yeah, I was amazed at her strength and resilience over the whole thing, because I'll give you an example. Even in this photo we were talking about a moment ago, you can see she's lost all her hair, and there's quite a few pictures which show that. Throughout our time in the hospital back then, if she was going to the bathroom to brush her teeth or whatever, or even just wash her hands or whatever, she would not do that unless she wore a cap, because she did not want to look at herself in the mirror without any hair. She was extremely sensitive about it.
Yeah.
And when she had first started losing her hair, it was a huge trauma for her. And when they said, this is too much, we have to shave, what is left, she was very, very upset about it.
Yeah.
And so, she refused to look. But then she was okay with looking at the photos of it. And she liked the photos. She felt these were important photos to show. And I think that shows really, really incredible strength of character. I mean, she was 14 then. I've never known anyone like that.
Darren Zamet-Lupi and I will link to that episode, and I'll also link to the fundraising page as well. We'll get on to your letters in a moment, but while we're talking about Facebook, and of course we're all aware that Facebook at the start of the week, this week, collapsed around us for six or so hours, didn't it? Depending upon where you were in the world, it was sort of Monday afternoon for us, or early evening rather, into the evening. Facebook just stopped. The world fell quiet. Nobody could post an update across the book of Face, Instagram, or WhatsApp, and so on. But the kids at the wedding that I was shooting, because I was shooting a wedding on the Monday. Oh, it is getting windy. Can you hear that? I put myself at the top of it's supposed to be one of Berkshire's highest points. I felt that walking up the hill, I've got to say. You should have heard me. I couldn't start the podcast at that stage. I was breathless. And I don't mean the song by, is it Natalie Imbruglia? Breathless? Oh, I don't know. So the kids, I noticed at the wedding, I wasn't really on, I don't spend a lot of time online at weddings. The closest I come to being on a computer is downloading and culling some images during the meal. But I noticed people sort of whispering about Facebook, and I thought, what's happened? Has something happened to Mark Zuckerberg or something? Everybody was kind of at sixes and sevens about Facebook. And the kids at the wedding, well, they obviously couldn't do what the adults did, as in bury their woes in a pint of Sambuca that Facebook couldn't do status updates on their wedding attire, but they went out and played garden games, which I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, doesn't it? Oh, what will the kids do when they can't use Facebook? But that's what happened. A dozen kids took to the lawn out back, gave me an opportunity to get some cracking photos, and they were playing. Well, they were playing really well, actually, until one of the kids picked up the metal bulls. Is it bulls or bull? Do you drop off the S at the end? Oh, I should have asked Valerie Jardin, although obviously that interview was recorded before this. I could ask my friend Emily, she'd know. Is it bull, Emily, or bulls? You know, where you throw the ball, the silver ball, and then you have to throw another one to get near it. This is a proper set, metal, and one of the kids threw it through a window. So that kind of ended that game. But of course, general panic spread when Facebook stopped. 10 million problems reported. Mark Zuckerberg lost 4 billion quid of personal share worth. I think he's since rebounded. Don't worry, Mark. Normal wealth has resumed. And I was left wondering whether I'd need to dust off my fax machine. Remember those? Anyway, I'm being flippant to a degree because I know the book of Face, Insta and WhatsApp do so much more than give kids an excuse to throw metal garden game balls through windows. But we've mentioned the good that can come through spreading the word, like Darren's campaign for that Ethiopian secondary school. Oh, look at that. Can you hear that? Beautiful. Now, that's not a red kite. Kestrel. Oh, lovely. Well, I've got the wrong lens entirely for getting pictures of birds. So 100 to 200 feet up. Always circling around me. You are making me nervous, all you lot circling around me. You really are. But Facebook, for many people, it was an odd experience, wasn't it? Did you feel odd about it? It left many photographers feeling, by the looks of it, out on a bit of a limb, really, because their marketing sort of depended upon it. But maybe we'll come back to that and talk about all eggs in one basket. Maybe we'll have another marketing episode. We had something, that dealt with that. It kind of included a few other bits as well, but maybe it's something we should come back to. Oh, the kite or the kestrel, whatever it's called, is gone now. Look, great big Chinook above. That's frightened everybody off. Although they're fantastic looking aircraft, aren't they? Right, some pictures from you. I have to say we're running through these nicely now, and since we've extended the Photowalk, it's great to hear from some of you who haven't emailed in too. Before, that is, with where you've been walking. It's great to hear from those who've thought, oh, I must send something in, and haven't, and then one day think, oh, go on, I'll just do it. So it's great to hear from you. Here's one from Peter has written in before. This is from Peter Gazer, who I am making Patron of the Week. You can see Peter's work on the show page today, and you'll also find a link to his Instagram, which is a wonderful, I'm going to use this expression, sketchbook of life. I love the picture of the lad asleep in the art gallery, by the way. So, there's a good humour in that one. What did you write on that? Not everybody's stunned by art or something like that. Anyway, from Peter, hello Neil. My wife and I relocated to New Hampshire for a few weeks this summer. The change of scenery gave me a much needed shot of motivation. Sometimes it does that, doesn't it? When you go somewhere new, you're seeing afresh. I'm often asked by couples, actually, Peter, or anybody else listening, whether I've had experience of a particular venue if I'm shooting it for a job. And sometimes I say, yes, I have. But also, I'm not absolutely convinced that it's really important or indeed matters. Because seeing somewhere new with fresh eyes is a fantastic experience for a photographer. Oh, look at that. There's whole new things to see. Let me just squeeze through here. Oop, I can't fit through here. Footpath? What, have you brought a machete maybe? Yeah. Here we go, we're through. So yeah, sometimes seeing something afresh gets those old creative juices flowing, doesn't it? So far, Peter says, I've been taking short walks to get to know the area and using my camera as my sketch pad. Now, we must have used this phrase because we've only used this recently, and Peter used this before that guest had introduced Sketchpad. Or sketchbook, sketchpad. There was me thinking it was reasonably fresh. Not at all. There's a lot to explore up here. I hope these photos are just the start of a productive few weeks. Thank you from Peter. I'll put those pictures from Peter up on the show page. Great, isn't it? To be able to just explore somewhere new. I'm doing that tomorrow. Now I'm probably putting I don't know whether I should ever say I'm doing this tomorrow, because then something happens like the weather turns. But tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the Friday, actually, if you're listening to this in Australia and New Zealand, oh, that does confuse me. Well, tomorrow I should be going. It's not so much a photo walk. I certainly hope it's not going to be a photo swim, but it's not really a photo cruise, because I'm going out on a tugboat. Tugboats aren't known to be particularly steady, are they? They bob about somewhat, but I'm going out to some forts, some World War II forts. There's a clutch of them just off the coast of Kent, on the east coast of England, down in the southeast. I'm going out to. You used to be able to get aboard the forts, and I'm hoping that there might still be a way to do that. I suspect there isn't, because over the years they've become very rusty, and I think health and safety has sort of put a stop to getting aboard the forts. But if the weather's okay, and I've looked at the wind, we're at 6 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour, so it looks. That's not what they would call moderate, is it? That's easy. That's fair. So I'm going out there. I'm going to make some pictures, and I'm going to take a photo walk on the coast as well. So I'm recording an episode sort of early for next week. I'm really looking forward to doing it. I've probably just put a stop to that, haven't I? Anyway, here's one from George Galanis. Now, if you hadn't told me you were from Greece. Galatsi. Is it Galatsi? Galatsi in particular. I would have guessed by your name. Galanis. Hi, Neil. I don't think I hear of many listeners in Greece. Perhaps I am the first. No, but there aren't too many that have emailed from Greece. I've been wanting to send a message for a while now to say thank you for your podcast. Well, thank you. And it reaches further than you think. I'm a portrait photographer, though less business has meant that I've gone back into a food preparation company with my family for this moment in history. I'm looking forward to returning to what I love doing one day, and maybe doing other photo interests too, not just portraits. So your podcast and your guests and your messages on the Photo Walk episode are helping keep that fire alive inside of me. All the best from George. Well, thank you, George, for your kind words and your email. It was really good to hear from you. As I said, it's always wonderful to hear from people that have written in before. I love that. You're part of the sort of friendship community, which is great, but it's also a real joy to hear from people that haven't emailed in before. So studio, here's a hint, studio@photographydaily.show. Tell us what you like to photograph, what you do, what your projects are, some feedback on the shows that you've heard. And George, the world of photography, well, it's just waiting for your talent again. Although actually, food preparation, there must be a story in that you can be making, just to keep those, as we called them before, photographic muscles flexed, as my guest Valerie Jardin would say, your photographic muscles, as Popeye would say. I'm just about to do a Popeye impression. Don't do that, Neil. I know I was limbering, wasn't I? Dangerously close. Pulled myself back just at the right moment. Slightly different note, but I've recently been making a sort of tenuous link to that. But I've recently been making a list of things that I need to do to flex my photographic muscles. There we go. I couldn't avoid it. Sorry. I'll try and edit that bit out. No, you won't, Neil, because you interrupted yourself. First rule of speaking: if you want to edit, leave gaps between your words. But yeah, I've been making a list of things I need to do personally to flex my own photographic muscles. It's all very well working as a photographer, having a genre, earning your bread from it, but equally sometimes, often it's good to step outside those comfort zones. We've already addressed that today. And so that's why I've started to form lists, things that I feel I can be photographing, things I've wanted to photograph for a while. And I have to say it's been very much influenced, this idea, by a photographer I spoke to called Dennis Berti di Lucy, whose philosophy to photography really, truly inspires me. I will put a link to his website. It's a really good one, and his philosophy, spot on. And so, yeah, his website, and I'm working on my new website, as you know. It's the never-ending website design, Neil. Yeah, we're going to have a launch party, just me and you and Carr, when eventually it makes it to Tinternet. But I'm working on my new website, and I'm introducing an extended portfolio to it, outside of what I'm known for. And I wonder whether George, so this is a roundabout way of saying, I wonder whether you could do that too. I mean, you're known for your portraits, yes, but why not make a story within the family business? And yeah, keep those. You might already be doing that. Look at these on the floor. Are these slow worms? Oh, I haven't got them. Yeah. Wow, look at these. I haven't got the right sort of... I won't be able to get a picture with the lens that I've got. I need a macro. You need a macro you do there, Neil? Yeah, I know. So anyway, I went off and listened back to Dennis, an Italian-based photographer who now lives... he now lives in Mexico. Because I thought he might have something that would accompany your story as well there, George. And here he is talking about starting all over and what he did within his storytelling business and, by extension, his website. And I'm hoping the link isn't too tenuous. I'm worried that it might be. We went round the houses slightly, but here's some inspirational words from Dennis Berti.
So I was thinking, after 40 years living in this world, which kind of photographer I am, what I want to achieve, what my goals are. So after a very long time of introspection, I decided it was good to start again with a new chapter of my life and say, okay, now let's go serious, because until a few years ago I was just a destination wedding photographer, but now I don't identify myself as a wedding photographer. I identify myself as storytelling. I do wedding photography too, but it's just another thing that I do. So for me, my way to work is exactly the same if I'm shooting a making of building let's say a hotel, or a family like a day in a life with a family, or a wedding or an event. I shoot exactly in the same way. So why I have to separate weddings from something else if my philosophy and my voice say that I work in the same way?
Dennis Berti, talking about reinvention, the power of change and starting anew. That's what I should have said a moment ago before the clip, wasn't it? Did I get rather lost there in my thoughts? Sometimes they are rather meandering, my thoughts. Well, that's what a photo walk's about, isn't it? You walk with a friend, you start talking about one thing, and it sort of melds, it morphs into to something else. Look at this in front of me. Look, see, I'm doing it again. This beautiful scene in front of me, ahead of me. Let me grab her. I'm going to put you in my pocket. Hold on, the sun's come out. Look at this. Look at those blue skies too. What are we at? So I've chosen 400 as my ISO. I've got the sunshine, because I've got this wide angle lens. Now I can get the sunshine at the top right hand corner, which of course, if I don't want it to entirely drown out the picture, then I'm going to have to really, what am I going to go to? F22. So there we go, F22. 500th of a second. Focus. I'm using focus peaking. Although at F22, everything's in focus. There we go. Great, the trees have become a bit of a silhouette. Take you out of my pocket. There we go. So, I had a chat last week about these clips that we play to. And I was asked if I have a particularly strong memory for all that's been said on the show, or shows, because occasionally I dip into the interviews that I recorded for the Fujicast as well to play back some inspiration. Just now and then, not very often. It's 98% of the time it'll be obviously from the Photography Daily Show. But no, the answer's really yes and no, which isn't very helpful, I know. I don't have do you know, your mails spark the memories of the interviews that I've recorded. A memory, do you know, if you were to pass me a script to remember in a week, my neurons would not fire in the same way. Or if you asked me to remember suddenly the name of a politician it's not necessarily quickly under pressure. If somebody says, what's the name of, I go into this kind of sheer panic. Oh, I can't think of the name. I don't think I'm that unusual, but I'd be a puddle on the floor folding if you put me under pressure with names and remembering a script. But I can remember things that were said on the interviews. But I'm starting to this is a job for an intern. Don't really have an internship in this country that would allow me to do it, I'm sure. But to go through every single interview and to snip out interesting bits that we could use and then somehow log them, categorize them. Anyway, we'll hear from today's guest in a moment, and I have a strong feeling that words coming from Valerie Jardin today will be used in future, most definitely to inspire within future shows as well. But first up, as you know, I treated myself to this, talking about it a moment ago, the 12mm Samyang used lens from our friends at MPB. But I've of course been talking about seeing the world a little wider the last couple of weeks, so it was great to hear from Jim Solos in Canada land, who has clearly won the lotto for the following reasons. Hello, Neil. I thought you might enjoy this, as I know you like shooting vintage lenses on your X Pro 1. Well, the Samyang isn't really a vintage lens, but I do have my Yashica 28mm from Tim Binder, don't I? Thank you, Tim. It's the gift that never stops giving, Tim. But I was listening to the Friday Photowalk while out on a walk on my own with a unique vintage lens that I shot on both my Fuji X-T3 as well as my Nikon F2. The lens is the Nikon 13mm f/5.6, which is known as, I should have this sort of holy music now, the Nikon Holy Grail lens. These lenses are incredibly rare. In fact, it's considered one of the rarest lenses in the world. Nikon's only ever made 350 of them, and it's believed there may be less than 100 remaining in the entire world. Not quite sure how they work that out, but we'll take their word for it. This one is serial number 30. While there are many lenses that fall into that focal range, Nikon produced... Hold on, I've got to concentrate for a second. I'll get back to you, Jim. I'm just going through some high nettles there. Right, Nikon produced a specific lens to prove that they were capable of producing an ultra-wide angle lens that is optically perfect and totally free of distortion. Now, my 12mm is, you pays your money, it takes your chances. You get what you pay for in life. I have to say, it's pretty good, but don't be expecting something like the Nikon Holy Grail of lenses, that's for sure. I spent the weekend shooting it and catching up with this week's Photography Daily podcast at the same time. I was really nervous and careful shooting this beastie because it's not only incredibly valuable financially, 50,000 Canadian dollars, what? But even more valuable from a historic perspective. On a side note, it's also a whopping 1.2 kilograms, so my arm's got a workout by the end of the day. By the time you read this, the Holy Grail will be safely back in the hands of its caretaker. Oh, I didn't read that bit before. Sorry, there was me, Jim, thinking, this is your lens. You've been using it for somebody else who owns it. Is that right? Sounds like it's come out of a collection, like, you know, some car owners have huge collections. They never drive them, but they let other people occasionally borrow them. But actually, 50K's worth of glass. Whew, I know there are people that use cameras to that value, but I'm not sure $50,000 worth, or pounds worth, or euros worth of lens. Oh, I don't think I'd feel very comfortable at all I take my hat off to you there. I shall put some pictures up on the show page today, though, so you can salivate over the historic pictures of it. This is like I suppose it's like the Jaguar E-type of lenses, isn't it? Also, I'll link to Jim's website underneath the pictures so you can see the extraordinary film projects that he has been working on. And we've talked about those before on this podcast. So thank you, Jim, for your mail. If you'd like to send a mail in, then studio@photographydaily.show, or you can send via the contact page, which is relevant because I want to talk about the questions that we have on there in a moment. Right, Valerie Jardin then. I spoke with Valerie for, well over an hour recently and decided to spread the interview actually across a couple of weeks. So we started last week and we're culminating in 2 chapters this week. She's a superb street documentary storyteller. She is a mentor and she's an author too, a prolific author. You know how sometimes we say, oh, there's a book in everybody, or I say that anyway, and I keep meaning to write my own book one day. What's on, Neil? What could you possibly have that's interesting? Oh, I don't know, I'll think of something. But Valerie, yes, she is a prolific writer, and you'll find ebooks on her website, and also you'll find some tangible hold it in your hands books too. And we pick up continuing the story from my introduction, talking about how you make pictures on the street, as we talked about at the start of today's show, that are important storytelling images that are a part of history, with a capital or lowercase h, but those pictures being respectful, as that was the message that clearly came in across last week's show. However, I did want to know what happens if people do say, whoa, Valerie, stop right there. You know, when you're caught, when you're making pictures of somebody and they say, what, could you tell me what that is of me? What's that all about?
Oh, no problem. I feel that what I'm doing is important. I'm never photographing people in vulnerable or embarrassing situation. It's really the beauty of everyday life. And it happens that people see me after the fact. Like the point is to get the shot without the subject noticing you. Otherwise, the shot is gone. So you don't even need to take it. So if they notice you, there is no picture. So the goal is not to be sneaky. The goal is to remain invisible until you can get the shot. Afterwards, if the person notices me, it's not a problem. I'm so happy to show them the picture. It's happened recently, actually. I photographed this young girl with a kite. Yeah. And I was walking on the beach. I stopped for a second, framed the shot, and I kept on going. And then all of a sudden this woman runs after me and said, hey, did you take a picture of my daughter? And I'm like, oh boy, maybe she felt, maybe she didn't like it. But no, she said, oh, I would really love to see it. I said, hey, here's my card, So we do that. I give my card. I let people contact me. I don't get their information. I let them contact me, or we exchange Instagram on the spot, and then they message me. And it's happened so many times. A gentleman saw his father in one of my fine art books in Paris on one of my photographs. I said, that's such a beautiful photograph of my father. And he said, could I buy a print? I'm like, no, of course not. I'm not going to buy a print, but I'm so happy to send you one. Yeah. And then he sent me a picture of his dad next to the print, and everything. So those are lovely moments. It happens a lot, actually.
See, I want to be really careful here. Now, I'm completely aware that I'm going to be clumsy as I walk into this question, but a question of gender. And it is a conversation I've had with male photographers where I personally have started to feel quite uncomfortable making photographs. And the moment you mention of the child being photographed, see, I wonder whether there's a difference if I made that picture and if I can see you nodding, so you know what I'm about to ask, and you made that picture. But because there's a very different undercurrent in the year 2021, 22, 20, whatever.
And it all depends on the country, too. It's much easier to photograph a child in the U.S. than it is in France, for example. Yeah. French people are much more sensitive to privacy. That said, my approach is always the same. No matter where I am, I'm always very respectful. So, yes, I would say maybe a woman is less intimidating, but I've seen firsthand on workshops. One of the best kids street photographer I've known was a gentleman in his 50s, and it's just such a genuine approach that he always had the best candid shots of children because he never looked threatening. And I've had some women photographers that were a bit too bold and, got in trouble. So not really in trouble, but, that the parent, you never argue with a parent, never. No. And most of the time, whenever possible, I like to make eye contact with the parent without the child knowing. Because if someone doesn't want you to photograph their child, they will let you know. It doesn't matter if you speak their language or not. But I like to make that eye contact with the parent as long as I can. The moment is still completely candid. Yeah. And I've done this a few times. And you don't have to show their face to make a beautiful photograph. So it's a case-by-case basis. You can't say, oh, yes, do photograph children on the street or don't. No, it's a case-by-case basis. Always put yourself in the shoes of the subject or the parents in that respect.
So do you essentially have, Valerie, a list of do's and don'ts?
I have a lot of don'ts, yes, because there are just too many disrespectful street photographers out there that are giving the genre a really bad rep. Yeah. And it's a shame because it is so important. I mean, if we don't document everyday life in a beautiful way, and I'm not saying beautiful, it doesn't have to be all people kissing, but I mean, in a respectful way, we won't have anything of this era left other than selfies of people, or we'll have surveillance footage. And so being able to do this in the tradition of the fathers of street photography, whenever they didn't stage their shots, the real decisive moment. I mean, yes, there are some photographs of the great early fathers of street photography that were staged, but still a bulk of their work was true documentary photography. And there is so much to learn from that, or the work of Vivian Maier that we may have never seen. And we learn so much from that time. So I find that it's the same for what we photograph today. It will have a historical value someday.
We have a phrase on this show now, or rather I learned a phrase from a photographer friend who's sadly no longer with us, which was gifted to him by his mentor many, many years ago. And it was, you're looking, but you're not seeing. And I've heard you talk about seeing photographically, because it is a different process, isn't it, to simply observing what we look at?
Absolutely. I see people look and not see all the time, but I see the growth. Yeah. And at one point, you see the point where they start seeing photographically. And that's when their work makes a huge leap. It can come really early. And I find that often it's the least experienced photographers, the least techie people that see better. They're less concerned about the technical parts, so they're more focused on seeing. Yeah. And so I find that sometimes I have photographers that just use their phone, and within those limitations, they're 100% focused on seeing the moment, not on fiddling with their gear or changing this or changing that. I mean, or wanting to shoot full manual. Like, why would you want to shoot street photography in full manual? Focus on seeing, not your camera. Your camera should become an extension of your vision. It should never come in the way. So that's why if people have lenses, they leave them behind. You come on the workshop on the street that day, you pick one lens, and hopefully it's the same lens you're going to use for a weekend or a week. And you don't carry extra gear because it's within those limitations that you will be able to grow and see better and to start learning to see photographically.
Well, you do call it purposeful imitation, don't you, on your workshops? Because we do like gadgets, us photographers, don't we? We like kit. Some of our camera bags are frankly like golfing bags. There's a club for every nook, cranny,
Not
rough
mine.
and sand trap. I know yours wouldn't be, and we'll get to yours in a moment. But you're very keen on that idea that you should limit yourself. And I would imagine initially some photographers find that quite difficult.
Yes, they feel a little naked if they don't have a camera bag with them. But honestly, they don't need one. All they need is an extra battery or two, and they're good to go. And it's so liberating. I mean, the most important component besides the camera that's in your hand is the comfortable shoes. And that's definitely the most important part of your attire as a photographer, or this as a street photographer. Just as long as you're comfortable and you can walk those miles, then focus on seeing.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely the moment that you're going to change lens that the shot of the day is going to happen, and you're going to miss it.
Do you know, in hundreds and hundreds of interviews, I've never asked this question, and I feel I need to. What's the brand of shoes that you have then?
Actually, I almost did an entire podcast episode about shoes, but now I rotate them. That's the key too. When you travel, always have 2 or 3 really comfortable pairs of shoes.
Top advice. But I will ask, by the way, because this seems a relevant point to ask. If I were to open up your camera bag, then what would I find in it?
I've been using the same camera for 8 years. Well, a different edition, but the X100 Fujifilm camera.
I was going to say that looks dangerously like an X100 to me.
Yes, it is. And I've been a Fujifilm X photographer for not as long as I've owned that camera, but for 7 or 8 years now. And I've been shooting this camera for that long. My previous camera was a 5D Mark II Canon. So it was a wonderful camera, but bulky, and definitely not a camera for that type of photography today. I mean, no one would go into street photography and buy a DSLR today. That would make no sense. And I can see that the change. I started teaching international photo workshops 10 years ago, where you would have 1 mirrorless and 9 DSLRs. And now I don't think there is 1 DSLR in any workshop anymore. Absolutely.
And that's the consistency that's important, because you mentioned, obviously, the X100 has a 23mm equivalent 35, as we said. I mean, you look at some of the great cinematographers like Hitchcock. Wasn't it? I think it was Psycho that he shot entirely on a 50mm lens.
On a 50, yeah.
Pretty sure it was that, wasn't it? That film.
It could be.
But having your 23mm, that means you've got consistency through your entire portfolio, and that's important, isn't it? It
is. Actually, I challenged myself to a 50 for a couple weeks last spring. I was testing something for Fujifilm, and I hated the experience. I mean, I never beta test except this camera, the X100. That's the only camera I will ever agree to beta test. I hate changing gear. I don't need another camera. I just need 2 of each one. I needed 2 of the F, 2 of the V's, because I need a backup in case I lose one or I break one. But I don't need anything else. So I don't have gear envy or gear lust or gas or whatever you call it. I don't care.
Let's talk about one of our favourite topics on the show, social media, and specifically how we use platforms such as Instagram. And it seems, from a recent conversation we've been having on this show and mails received on the subject, we have a real love-hate relationship with it, don't we? The mechanics of likes and engagement, and on one hand you're mentoring on getting your work seen, but on the other hand you're suggesting don't shoot for the likes. But we're feeding the machine, as it were. It's become part of a photographer's life. So how does winning the battle to be seen whilst not shooting for the likes, how does that work in tandem?
Well, the thing is, if you shoot for the likes, you're not going to be true to yourself, and you're never going to find your voice as an artist. So the day that you stop caring so much about the likes, you're going to breathe a lot easier, and you're going to be so much happier. I know exactly what kind of pictures are going to get the amount of likes. And they're usually not the pictures that I feel the most satisfaction, because I knew they were more difficult. There was true merit.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's mention specifically your one on of the guy on a ladder in Berlin, Valerie, with his hand reaching up into a much larger hand that's part of signage we talked about before. It performed okay within the gram, but nowhere near as well as a picture of your X100 just sat on a sideboard, which is okay, yet the Berlin picture is extraordinary.
That is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph. The moment, I was at the right place at the right time, but I saw the humor in this. I raised my camera and got the shot, and then a fraction of a second later, the guy was done. Yeah. And that moment would never happen again in a million years. So that, I felt, was probably one of my proudest shot that year, but it's not one that people will respond the most. I mean, will like the most, for example, because people don't always understand people don't always understand how difficult it is to actually make a successful street photograph where you have control over nothing except your gear and your vision.
Yeah.
You don't know what people are going to do. Nothing is set up, nothing is staged. They're just complete. It's a fraction of a second in a stranger's life. So to make it work and leave room for the imagination, tell the story while leaving room for the imagination, or bring a smile to the viewer, is difficult. So not everybody understands how much goes in that fraction of a second.
I do want to establish this, actually, and we kind of touched on this already, but I think it's really important in terms of street. You're currently living in the States. You mentor in Europe, and of course the rules of engagement have certainly changed for photographers in Europe. Has that changed the way that you mentor those that are in Europe? In particular, you mentioned Paris. Privacy laws are very different. Understanding what's legal and what's not legal seems very open to the interpretation of how we read the law, or you read the law as a photographer.
Absolutely. And I'm not a lawyer, but I've consulted a lot of them who deal with this type of, privacy law for photographers and such. And really, as long as you're respectful and you're in a public place, no matter where you are in the world, and you photograph a moment in someone's life, there really is nothing that could go wrong. Even if the person said, "Oh, I don't want to be photographed," blah, blah, they would still have to prove that you did damage to them, with that photograph. I mean, and some people have tried, but especially in France, where street photography was actually born, that it's such an important part of the culture that it is a well accepted type of photography. It's loved by everyone, really. I mean, we all grew up in France with a calendar of Robert Doisneau or Cartier-Bresson on our walls and posters. I mean, that's what I had in my room when I was a kid. Little did I know I would become a documentary photographer. So it is such an established thing that even the law sides most of the time with the photographer in cases like that, because it is so important to document that. So you would have to be extremely disrespectful or photograph something that's illegal or making fun of someone in a really obvious way. And the same, humor in street photography is much more difficult than making fun of something. It's much more subtle. So humor is not making fun ever. Humor is subtle humor. And so never making fun of a subject or of a situation, never photographing people in vulnerable situations. I mean, that's common sense. Yeah. And that's definitely what I teach. I've worked with the homeless community through many projects, one of them with Joshua Coombs from the UK, and as part of the Do Something for Nothing project, where I documented his work on the streets of New York, Paris, and Minneapolis. But we were telling the story. And at that point, I actually had every person we worked with sign a model release. And that's the only time I would ever ask anyone to sign a model release, is because they were in a vulnerable situation. And I was photographing to raise awareness, but I wanted them to be fully aware that those photographs would be used for that purpose. Other than that, everything I photograph is just everyday life. We're under surveillance 24/7, pretty much. So,
but there is a way of photographing anonymously or protecting anonymity. In fact, you wrote a book about it.
Anonymous, yes, absolutely. Because there are a lot of people who are concerned about that. There are people who do not want to share photographs of recognizable faces on social media, and that's okay. If they don't feel like doing that, then don't do it. But if you still want to practice street photography, because it's such an exciting way to photograph, and it's something you can do anywhere. You're never going to be bored waiting for a plane at an airport or at a train station, because you're going to be photographing life around you. There's so many ways you can do it anonymously. I wrote the book, but I can't say the word.
I was worried that I was going to fall over it. I'm pleased you did.
So the many ways that you can photograph people without revealing their identity.
Valerie Jardin, and she'll be back for chapter 2 shortly. I'm really hoping after Christmas. Well, there's a few things going on after Christmas. He says, tempting fate again. One of them is that we have the Photowalk retreats coming up. Now, I think, don't get angry at me now, but I think they're going to be initially, because we're doing a sort of a pilot one, a sort of not-for-profit one, which will be open to patrons. Now, we'll have 5 or 6, possibly 6 places open, and I'm thinking at the moment of doing that in February, or certainly late January, February. That's the plan. And also I'm hoping, and obviously this very much depends upon that blasted C word. Blasted, Neil? You sound so Victorian. It does, doesn't it? But I'm hoping to return to West Africa and spend some time with Jason Florio. Oh, and Helen, sorry, and Helen. Jason and Helen Florio. Sorry, Helen. You are part of it. Yeah, I'm hoping to spend time with them making some pictures in West Africa, in the Gambia. And it seems that if we do that, if I do get out there, well, you could come with me. Do you want to come with me? Yeah, why don't we both go? That'd be fun. Let's go and make some pictures of the Gambia, go and make some photo stories, and be joined by some photographers that are based in West Africa. At the moment, Jason's working on a project with Gambian photographers about photojournalism, and it's a fascinating story, the Gambia in particular, because of the dictatorship they were under not very long ago, actually. I mean, the years are passing, but it wasn't really that long in historical terms, and how being a journalist, or certainly a photojournalist, was a dangerous occupation. And so there's some very interesting stories to tell. And I suppose really I would make that into, definitely, that would become at least 2 weeks worth of specials, Photowalk specials. So that to come, hopefully. There we go, show news. We should have had a jingle, show news. So this Photowalk, this very different, I think very original type of photography podcast. I certainly don't hear of anything else. I mean, I've heard people going on walks and interviewing, but in the way that we do it here, and you're very much a part of it, and I'm very proud that you are. It is rather unique, but it relies upon you to send the pictures you make on your own walks, and the messages and the stories, in which could be anything loosely to do with photography, art, and filmmaking. So, and actually mental health. It's a really, really precious topic to us. So send in your thoughts and send in your pictures to studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels on the wide side, please. And if you're sending them in for the 365 feature, remember Lynn Fraser's suggestion at the start, which is if you don't send in lots of information, at least send in the geography, where they were taken, the geographical location, so we can put a sort of a pin, a virtual pin in the map. So to your letters, I love this one. On the contact page, I ask you, this is what I was talking about just prior to listening to Valerie. On the contact, I've got to get through this. Here's another very small space to squeeze through. Do you know, sometimes I think they do their utter best, don't they, to dissuade you from going on footpaths. Yeah, the footpath's open. Come on in. And then they go and stick a bull in the field. Oh, apart from that. Or horses. I feel particularly nervous around horses. I'm not great around horses. Although I did meet somebody recently when I went to photograph a wedding, and I went to a farm shop beforehand. I love eating in farm shops. In fact, in a short while, I'm going to end up at the Saddleback farm shop, and I'm going to grab myself something in there with a nice coffee. I wonder if they sell Garibaldi's. Oh, now that will make my day. But and I was talking to her because it was a farm that owned a big stables, and a stud, I think, as well. And she was saying, don't be worried about horses. They're like big dogs. I said they were a bit bigger than big dogs. He said, no, really, they are. They're friendly. They want to come up and say hello to you. So if you ever see a horse, just let it come to you, because really they're quite sociable animals. I'm trying to shield the wind coming at me at the moment with a script, so it sounds a bit echoey. Echo. So I'm gonna consider that in future. There is a field coming up here that's got horses in it, and I know it's essentially the shortcut to get back to the farm, but I'm not sure if I'm brave enough. If I talk to you while I'm going across the field, that might give me some sense of security. In essence, you feeling like you're with me. Oh, that could do the trick. Anyway, so yes, on the where were we? Contact page. Were we digressing? You were rather, Neil. On the contact page, yeah, I ask you a few questions to kind of inspire conversation for this episode, actually, the Photowalk episode. And you're very good, you know. Often you come up with your own stuff to talk about, which is fantastic. But sometimes you need a little bit of a gentle shove, just to give you some ideas and things to discuss. So that's why I put a list of questions up on that particular page. And Terry Horn wrote in. He sent some pictures too, but he looked at the questions and took those as a prompt and sent back some answers to the questions that are asked on the contact page on photographydaily.show. The questions are: why you shoot and what you do, what kit and why, how making pictures has changed your life, what photographers you follow, and who we should talk to perhaps as a future guest. And Terry had some thoughts. Hang on, here's a gate. There we go. See? Now that's much easier. But does that mean I'm in the land of horses? Oh, I think it does. Oh, go on, be brave, Neil. All right. So Terry, yes. From Terry Horn, and I'll link to his... on the show page, I'll link to his Insta, and actually he has 2 websites. He says, I took a short 6-kilometre photo walk yesterday through Jinshitan, China, to one of my favourite coffee shops. See, you're doing the same as me, Terry. I usually play a podcast and a music podcast called Parish News. All right. It's experimental music, says Terry. I quite like stuff like that. World music and experimental music. Definitely that's on my list. I'm working on 3 projects at the moment. 1, 365 plus. That's my main project. 2, collecting photos of chairs out in the wild. See? Now that is very niche. And 3, documenting my stay here in China. And then he's answered the question. So he starts off with, why you shoot what you do. He says, I like to explore my community and area. I like showing signs of humanity without disturbing people's daily lives. That seems a very laudable thing. I like that idea. What kit do you use and why? I like smaller cameras. I basically use mine as point and shoots, nothing fancy. I hate fiddling with the cameras and I like to just pop them in my bag or pocket. No camera bag here. However, that being said, I do enjoy going out with one of my Fujifilm instant cameras as well. How making pictures has changed your life? Well, a couple of reasons, he says. One, it gets me moving, simply. I like painting and drawing, but that's a solitary endeavour, which usually means being indoors, but I like to explore the outdoors, urban areas mostly. And 2, teaching art and photography means I get to travel a little. And 3, this is cliche, but photographs suspend an event or moment down to a single image. They do, don't they? And finding that image is golden. It's like writing a haiku. Hang on, there's another gate here. That means we made it through the horse field with not one single dobbin. Yeah. There we go, that was easy. And 3, this is cliche. Sorry, let me say that one again. And 3, this is cliche, but photographs suspend an event or moment down to a single image. And finding that image is golden. It's like writing a haiku. That's Haiku. I had no idea. Well, I have no idea where I am now, actually, while we're on that subject. But I had no idea what a haiku is, so I had to look it up. It's a Japanese poem of 17 syllables in 3 lines of 5. So it's 5, 7, and then 5 again. Traditionally evoking images of the natural world. I'm going to come back to that in a moment's time. Haiku. So just park that one. All right, Neil, parked. What photographers you follow and why? I follow many on Instagram and YouTube, everyone from Sean Tucker to Samuel Streetlife Lintaro. I like everything from landscape to still life to street. My current favourite, probably because I'm trying to work on self-portraits myself, is Fiona Lark. Fiona Lark, yes! Do you know, that's a good shove to drop a line, Fiona Lark. And Samuel Streetlife, because I'm a big fan of the Recode GR system. Michael Kenner is another one I really like. They're my favourite photographers, Yusef Sudek and Sol Leiter. Those 2 photographers got me into taking photographs. Any photographers you feel we should talk to? I don't know, your judgment has been spot on so far. He says, the 2 I mentioned in the last question, Michael Kenner, well, of the 2 rather, well, consider Michael firmly written to. I did that last night. So look, going back to this haiku, Haiku, haiku. Once again, it's a Japanese poem of 17 syllables in 3 lines of 5 and 7 and 5. Often it's about nature and love, that kind of thing. But I'm absolutely fascinated by how a poem could be strictly 17 syllables and have a structure in 3 lines, because that doesn't seem much, does it? And you add to that, there's no rhyme to this. It's not. We're not talking about a sort of. I know it's not the right structure to be a limerick, but we're not talking about a limerick. That sort of structure at all. No. And I thought, well, best way to describe it is probably to read you some haiku. So I went to look for some haiku and found the following. A World of Dew by Kobayashi Issa. A world of dew, and within every dewdrop, a world of struggle. Sonia Sanchez, this one's simply called For You. Love between us, speech and breath. Loving you is a long river running. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is haiku. Sometimes they do break the 17 syllables and 5-7-5 rule from what I've seen, actually down to language. A lot of the Western ones, they completely break the rules. But I think they try and observe it. They observe it as close as they can get, but they're not always faithful to the purest haiku. Here we go, squeezing through some more branches again. There we go. There's a lot of munkjack round here. I haven't managed to take one single picture of one because I've got entirely the wrong lens on. Just have to take my word for it. But there's quite a lot of munkjack. Am I going the right way? Hope so. I'm getting a bit peckish now. You getting peckish? I am, Neil. This has turned into a long walk. I know. I actually should have done a step count today. Oh, actually, the step count is on the. Oh, is it? Because I turn off the. I turn it onto airplane mode because I use my phone as my recorder. I'm not sure without. If it's in airplane mode, it's probably not going to do a step count, is it? I'll have a look when I'm having my coffee and my farm lunch in a moment's time. So sometimes they do break the 17 syllables 5-7-5 rule, but it's wonderful to learn about new things, new cultures, new customs. Japan is on my list of places. I know you live in China, but you were talking about Japanese culture. But Japan is on one of my. It was definitely on the list of places I want to go and photograph and to actually immerse myself in. I think it's fair to say, I don't think that we've ever received an email from Japan. Now I did go look up how many downloads of that 500,000 are from Japan, and it's teeny, absolutely teeny. We're talking roughly about 200-ish. So I'm not sure that I should ever expect an email from Japan, but if you do listen in Japan, I'd love to hear from you. Have some photographs from the photo walks that you make, be that city, be that urban or countryside. Oh, but I'll tell you who has been there though. and photographed and studied the culture is our good friend, French photographer Michel Del Sol, who now lives in New York with his Japanese wife. They went to Japan a good few years back to make a photo story and book about LGBT at the time that they were in the country. And whilst they were there, they found some wonderful customs. And I always remember Michelle. This is a memory I have that's very strong. Michelle talking about the custom of bath time.
So it's the bath. So it's a big bath, and you actually shower before you take the bath. So the bath is not so much to clean yourself, but it's to cleanse yourself, and to relax yourself more than to clean yourself. So it's actually the same. The hot water, you have a tub with no faucet, so two people could lie down in it.
Yeah.
And then when you enjoy it, and then when you finish, the water should be as clean when you leave as when you walked in.
Yeah.
And then you can just
sometimes they have like a bamboo curtain that sort of rolls open on top, so it keeps the warmth for the next person to go in. So we share a lot of things in Japan. We shared their life with them. Snippets of their life. We shared dinner, breakfast, the bath, or the time of the bath with them.
The French photographer now living in New York, Michel Del Sol. Wonderful. Talking about showering before you have your bath. So you're clean and cleansed, and then covering the bath with bamboo. Isn't that wonderful? To retain the heat for the next person. I did tell our boys about this at dinner time last night, this custom, who simply said, "I'm not sharing bath water because he probably wheezes in it." Talking about each other. Sorry, that rather brought the romance of that lovely piece about Japanese haiku poetry and custom crashing to an end, didn't it? But I do like to share with you. So before the second chapter, my final part, chat with Valerie Jardin. I'm in the woods now. This is lovely. Do you know, Simon Baxter, our guest a couple of weeks ago, was absolutely right about being in the woods. Listen to this. Hold on for a second. Now, I know there's an aircraft in the background, which does rather ruin it, but have a listen. The solitude. Listen. Isn't that lovely? There was a piece in one of his YouTube films. I'm sure it was Simon that was talking about this. Yeah, I'm sure. About photographing. I've always thought photographing the woods at summer is lovely because you get the backlit leaves, but apparently some people don't like that. They like the winter and the autumn far more, which I suppose every season brings its advantages. But I'm looking now at the trees above the canopy, very light canopy above me in this small piece of woodland here, thinking, that's fantastic how that sun's just peeking through. In fact, let me get a picture. I'm going to pop you in the pocket. There we go. And let's get a picture. Oh, battery's about to go. I've got some spares, don't worry. It's red light flashing at me. I'm going to sort of move myself until the light comes peering through. There we go. Another one of those. 4,000th of a second. F4. And just, there we go. You've got to wait for the shafts of light to really open up. It's like a theatrical spotlight coming through the leaves. It's a bit dead center, my composition. Take you out of the pocket. It's a bit dead center, yes, but yeah, I like that. Fabulous. Sort of pool of light in front of me now in this fantastic piece of just quiet woodland. I am also aware, and Simon made me aware of this as well, not to leave too much of a footprint as you walk through the understory. See, I'm using all the right words. I hope this is not a sign on the floor that says private. I think it is. Shh, don't tell anybody. So, before my second chapter of my chat with Valerie Jardin, some quick-fire emails, I think. Do you remember we were talking about Insta? Of course, Neil. For a while you talked about nothing else. All right, okay. Well, here's one from Rob Wiskin. Hello, Neil. My take on Instagram is that everyone will be affected differently. Some people, of course, we were talking about the changes to Instagram, weren't we? And what that means for photographers. Many photographers who were entirely unhappy. Oh, there's a monkjack ahead of me. Oh, I so wish I had another lens on me. Oh, don't move. Oh, it's gone. Gone. That was lovely. Yeah, we were talking about Instagram's changes and how photographers, of course, were up in arms. YouTubers were making films. It's the end of life as we know it, and all that kind of stuff was going on. But yeah, Rob says, my take on it is that everyone will be affected differently. Some people, like myself, would either have just started or just use it for the cloud, whilst others have built their business model completely around it. The winners will be those that embrace and figure out how to utilize it. Bravo, absolutely correct. If I could applaud, I've got one hand on the microphone, another hand on the clipboard with your messages, so I can't. But there's an applause going on there, a virtual applause, Rob. Take a bow. But see, not everybody sees the changes as a problem. Brian Taylor, thank you for your mail about how inspirational the show is, Brian, first of all. I'm flattered by your words. I listen to episodes as I ride my bike. Stationary version, he says. Your shows have inspired me to start my own podcast. You rock, and thanks for the inspiration. I will have to show my kids that. I don't think anybody's ever said you rock before. They'll probably just say, Dad, that's so 80s. Nobody says you rock anymore. But I'm going to link to Brian's podcast in the show notes. Now, Brian's only done one episode so far. Brian, I am looking at you now. If I was wearing reading glasses and I could do that thing where you look over reading glasses and that kind of like, oh, come on, I would do. But what he's got is absolutely excellent. It's that kind of, what would the style be? It's a kind of listening on a hot summer's late evening, sun in the porch, taking on a bottle of beer and swinging on the lounger, making sure the rattlesnakes don't get too close kind of listen. There we go. That was a very long interpretation of it, but that's what it feels like. It's fantastic. Go listen to that. I'll put a link on the show page for you. And one from Eric with a K Peterson from Denmark land. I think, Eric, it was you that started all this business of putting land on the end of every country, wasn't it? We've got America land, we've got Canada land, we've got Denmark land, we've got Iceland. Oh, no, Iceland doesn't work, does it? Iceland land. No, it doesn't work at all. Hi, Neil. I found the cure for IKEA trips. Did we need one? Which we mentioned last week. I knew I had to go to IKEA. Now, I'd just like to say for the record here, that I am not anti-IKEA in any way, shape or form. And we actually have mentioned it on the FujiCast as well, haven't we? I quite like IKEA, but I understand that some people do get a little bit, what's the word? Anxious? Anxious, probably, for reasons that will become clear through this mail. I knew I had to go to IKEA, says Eric with a K from Denmark land. For me, there are just too many people. It's all too close. So there we go. I can understand your anxiety, particularly in these times. So Friday, I procrastinated by going to the cinema and seeing Dune. See, that was a way of getting out of it. Saturday, latest iteration of a Bond movie. Even cleaning, doing dishes by hand, anything I could do to get out of going to IKEA. Sunday came, and I knew I had to. Happily, though, I took the Friday Photowalk along in my ears, and it was bliss. Going about in my own world with your voice in the interviews. A happy place in the midst of IKEA. Of course, I bought more than planned. Well, you always do, don't you? Whenever you... I mean, that's the only reason sometimes I'm a little bit anti us all going as a family. Because I think if I go alone, I can just about get away with without needing to go through the 50p market or however much it is. Is everything 50p? Or a pound or whatever it is. You know, I'm buying 3,000... frames that all look fantastic. They think, I need that one, need that. Oh, definitely got, yeah. I can just about get away without doing that. But if I have the family, we are absolutely doomed. And we also have to go to the restaurant. Mind you, I do like the Swedish meatballs with is it jam they serve with it? It's a bit odd, but it works, doesn't it? And the gravy. I digress. Happy place in the midst of IKEA, says Eric with a K. Of course, I bought more than planned. And then came the name from my past. This is the point where I should go into something else, shouldn't I, and come back to it. No, cliffhanger, Neil, don't do that. What name from the past is he referring to? I shall tell you. Yozza Hughes. Do you remember we talked about Yossa or Yozza? Yozza. You pronounce it as Yozza, don't you? Well, it's spelled Y-O-S-S-E-R, Yossa. I do not remember the Geezer job catchphrase, but I do remember the depressing images of the area he walked in and him head-butting people frequently. That was a headbutt. There was a headbutt scene that made an impression on my whole school. Most of the boys walked around trying to headbutt each other, shouting, "I'm Yozza Hughes," and thought it was hilarious. Yeah, I seem to remember, Eric with a K, that kind of happened at our school as well. God, you've just brought back a rotten memory. Did Yozza Hughes and the drama, I incorrectly said sitcom last week, pointed out by Christine Barter in a DM, but yes, I got that wrong, didn't I? It certainly wasn't a sitcom, it was a drama. There was some black humour in it, yes, but it wasn't really a sitcom. But did Yozza really make it all the way to Denmark land? Did he? Did you have Boys and the Black stuff? Just very quickly, by the way, if you weren't listening last week, you're thinking, what are they talking about? It was a TV drama in the UK called Boys and the Black Stuff, which Christine, actually, in the DM to me, pointed out correctly. It was a black humoured look at life in a depressed side of Britain in the 80s, where jobs were not always easy to come by. People had to literally fight to pay their rent. Cool, that sounds like a barrel of laughs, Neil. Is that what you used to watch as entertainment? Yes, it was. It was very good, though, actually. But anyways, Eric with a K says, your show got me through IKEA, and I didn't headbutt anyone. Not that my head and neck will be able to do it anymore. As always, thanks for another great episode. And for me, a trip down memory lane. Well, you're welcome. Yozza Hughes, eh? And then James Devonshire wrote to me, Yozza Hughes, Neil. See, I mentioned Yozza Hughes, and it's one of the most popular subjects of last week's show. Should do a whole episode. I wonder if we could get... It's Alan Bleasdale, isn't it? I wonder if it'd be fantastic. Is Alan into photography? Because if he's still with us. Yes, he is. I'm sure he is. Alan Bleasdale. We could have him on the show, couldn't we? Talking about photography. And Yozza Hughes. That would probably get one of the biggest downloads ever. James Devonshire wrote to say, Yozza Hughes, Neil. I inexplicably snorted and shouted yes when listening, which I didn't do on a photo walk, but in my workshop in Nottingham, where I handled textile printing. Everybody looked up, and I spent the morning boring everybody to sleep with stories from the 80s. The young uns went early to lunch, due to me, and in part, you. I don't know whether you remember, but there was actually a record release called Giz a Job. No, I didn't, but I kind of did the moment I went off and did the research and looked for that song, and I found it, and I'm going to put, it's on YouTube, I'm going to put the YouTube, it's not so much a film, but I think it's some stills, aren't there? Yeah, stills from the song that are sort of rotated as it plays. Yeah, I'll put that on the show page today, Giz a Job. I kind of remember it now, one of those songs that could make it to the top 40 in the days where that sort of stuff could. It wouldn't these days, would it, I suppose? More's the pity. One moment we're talking Japanese culture, aren't we? Poetry, haikus. And the next moment we're talking about Yozza Hughes, headbutting people, very English 80s character. So I tell you what, I think we should give France the next opportunity to speak. And our guest, Valerie Jardin, back for chapter 2, documentary street storyteller, author, mentor. And to start this final chapter, let's talk about the pressures of being new, fresh, or, new ideas, finding things to photograph, having inspiration, or as the French may say, displaying a little vive la défense. Do you think photographers struggle to find their own voice when we're so immersed in so much imagery? It's so easy to be led in one direction or another, even subconsciously by what we see, and the amount of adverts, for example, on billboards or pictures we see online, Instagram feeds passing by, rate of knots. Yeah,
I think it's getting more and more difficult to actually stand out as well. I mean, it was much easier to be a photographer 50 years ago, honestly, than it is now, because there is a lot of good work out there. So to stand out and all this amazing work is difficult. But it's also really easy to lose yourself and your own voice, as you said, or your own identity. And that's why you should always post what makes you happy and not post for the likes. Just be true to yourself. How many times have I looked at a photographer's portfolio And then there is one photograph that is in motion blur, or it may not even be on purpose, but it's just slightly blurred. And they go really quickly through it. I'm like, wait. What was that? And they said, oh yeah, well, that's out of focus. I'm like, this has so much soul and so much emotion in your day's work or in your week's work. This is definitely the shot that stands out the most. But people are so afraid of the pixel peepers out there who are going to say, well, that's not sharp, or this or that. So just detach yourself to those people. That's my advice. Because ultimately, unless you're working for a client, but ultimately as a documentary photographer, you are the only person you need to please with your work.
Yeah.
And keep that in mind at all times. You are the only person you need to please.
I want to come back to your work, though. There's a plethora of work, as I've said, to see on your site. But I want to pick out a few examples, and it seems unfair to do that because there's so much. But I picked out ordinary objects. Where you become a collector of what we see every day visually. I think that's a collector. And it seems to be your playground as well. Coffee cup, stone on a beach, coiled rope, abandoned shoe, a hat, which just goes to prove there's something to photograph always.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. How do you, and the goal of those exercises is to photograph an object without touching it at all.
Yeah.
So that's when you dance around the object to make the strongest possible frame without touching it, without moving it, just by moving yourself and your camera. And so again, that's an exercise that is done with a fixed focal length, and it's great exercise. And so you can make a series, or you can make, and even when I tell my students, work it till you make it. Just work your frame of that object until you find the strongest possible frame. By doing that exercise often, anywhere, could be on your windowsill, it could be on your desk. As you do this more and more, you will be able to find the strongest possible frame right away, eventually, without having to do that exercise. So it's again, doing those visual push-ups. To become a better photographer of anything, you have to be able to photograph pretty much anything and make compelling photographs. And one thing that I also tell my students, like, it's never the camera's fault. I don't ever want to hear someone say, oh, it's my camera. No, it's usually user error, or it never blame the camera. No. You know, our cameras, the cheapest camera today is better than the most expensive camera from 10 years ago. So never blame the camera. It's your vision, and you're fully 100% responsible for the success of the photograph, not the camera. So that's also very important.
And since we mentioned introvert and extrovert, Mirrored Me, as the name suggests, pictures of you in a mirror. But again, and I was delighted to see that, by the way. I don't know why I've not seen that collection before. Another opportunity to find a personal project maybe that scratches a creative itch, perhaps. You brought out your inner Vivian. Now, of course, you're an extrovert. Vivian was an introvert, I think. I'm right in saying that. So
I think we can assume that.
So it's probably a good exercise, isn't it? For introverted photographers, go make pictures of yourself, and you're your most available subject at all times. Yeah, there are some amazing self-portrait photographers. I mean, it can be as simple as mine, where just snapshots, in a reflection. They're more than snapshots.
Well, but they actually are just past. Okay. They are grab shots. Yeah, they're never set up or anything. It's just I do everything like I do my street photography. So it's really, there's nothing processed. It's just a shot. But there are photographers who've done so many amazing self-portrait projects, especially during the pandemic, because they were their most available subject at all times. And there's so much amazing work out there. I'm really envious, because I don't think I would have the patience to set up some shots, some self-portrait shots like I've seen. But it's very inspiring.
And I was looking through your New York portfolio again, and of course, there's a city that's alive with photographic opportunity in every corner, every turn. But I wondered, you said that you know when you're going to have things that are in colour or monochrome before you make the picture. But I do wonder what that decision is and what makes a picture colour, what makes a picture monochrome.
Well, it's actually more difficult to shoot in color and than it is in black and white because you have more elements to be aware of. So it's always about what is the subject? Is the color going to work with the subject? That said, some people only shoot black and white or only shoot color. So then the decision is made up front. I let the subject make the decision. So if the color is part of the story, then yes, and I always set example where, okay, this would make no sense in black and white. I wouldn't even show it in black and white because it would make no sense. It's all about the color, or vice versa. Sometimes the color is so powerful that the emotion is lost. And I went to Cuba a few years ago, and when you think Cuba, you think color.
Yeah.
Well, I shot more black and white in Cuba than I did color because for me it was the soul and the emotion and the people. And in the color, it was lost. So removing the color will definitely bring back bring the subject center stage because it will be less distracting. So yes, definitely something that should be made before you press the shutter, because very, very rarely, maybe 1 in 100, would a photograph be as strong in color or black and white? Usually it's very clear. It's either black and white or color. There's hardly ever room for debate. So that's why it should become part of the creative process, not left for post-processing. Even if you shoot RAW, I shoot JPEG because I love the film simulations in my camera. That's why I shoot Fujifilm. So why would I shoot RAW and try to create my own recipe when I love the way it is and I can just fine tune it in camera? But even photographers who shoot RAW, and I never influence people to switch to JPEG. That's totally up to them. They should definitely put that in their creative process. Why is this going to be color or black and white? And to learn to shoot in black and white by setting your LCD in black and white, at least, so that you have a feel of what those tones are going to be like.
You know, the interesting thing is we could probably do a whole special just looking through your portfolio, going one by one down and asking you
updating.
Well, look, you know, that's the thing about websites, though, isn't it? Often for a lot of viewers, it's the first time they've ever seen it. But I don't like to have a stock question or questions, but I have been asking this to a few of the photographers I'm lucky enough to speak with. If I took your camera away from you tomorrow, assuming you've not hidden another one in the bathroom, well, I know you have a lot of cameras, but you've just got to go with this one and assume you only have the one, what would you do with your life?
Oh, I would go into major depression. I honestly... I'm like, you know, the little kids who have their safety blanket with them at all times. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what my camera is to me. Even if I don't use it, I need it. Yeah. I need to know it's there. I get into anxiety if I don't have it. So I really don't know what I would do. If I could still keep my phone, I'll be okay.
No, you can't have the phone. That's cheating. No. But if I were to gift you, by the way, I'm interested to know where you would go, because you shoot all over the world and you do courses all over the world. If I were to gift you a ticket right now, an airline ticket, where are you going?
Well, where I'm actually going in a couple of weeks, it's Paris. It's always been my favorite city to shoot and to teach in. So I lead workshops. There's several workshops in Paris every year. That's the one that I'll never get tired.
Yeah. Why? What is it?
Photographing. I just don't know. It's just that there is something, and I don't know, maybe because it is home and because there's so much diversity, and you go from Paris to Amsterdam to Rome, you're an entirely different world, and it is just so beautiful.
I think you've just demonstrated you're a hopeless romantic.
You have to follow your heart, and I follow my heart in everything I do. Yeah. And there are places that don't inspire me, but there are still stories to be told. Really, you should be able to do your best work in your own city. A lot of street photographers only do their do their work when they travel. And that's not a good idea. You should always do your best work at home, because you know the streets, you know the light, you know where the shadows are going to be at what time. So there are beautiful moments of everyday life to photograph in any place, even in a small town. I mean, I spend a lot of time in Normandy, in a very small coastal town, and I can be there for 2 weeks without ever going to a city, and I photograph every day on the beach, and there are beautiful moments everywhere. So there is no excuse not to do street photography. You don't have to be in a big city, you don't have to travel, you can do that in your own little town. There are stories to be told.
The fantastic Valerie Jardin, and I will of course share some links on the show page today, so you can go and see Valerie's well, there'll be some pictures there as well that you can spy on that show page. So that's it for this week. Not that it's homework, but I heartily suggest a visit to the show page this week for all the links and a brace of films too, including Richard Bram's thoughts about looking for gestures and letting human gestures, subtle or otherwise, take you to a picture. I certainly learned a lot through watching that short film. Interesting to hear from Michael Dries, who was talking about asking for a portrait. We were discussing flexing your photographic muscles and not being afraid to ask for a portrait. And of course, he was suggesting that most people just say, yeah, why not? Happy to. Who else did we hear from this week? Was it Gabriel Matola? Or it could have been John Manell, actually. I think it was John Manell who said, the Portrait Per Day man, who said, even if people say no when you're asking for a portrait, if you're making street portraits, even if they say no, you often end up having a nice chat anyway, which is true. Timely reminder from Lynn about Reuters photojournalist this week, Darren Zamet-Lupi's fundraiser to build a school in Ethiopia named after his late daughter Bex. Very potent to hear his words again. It was his birthday, actually, I think earlier this week, or was it at the weekend? Go look for the work of our patron of the day, Peter Gazer's work. He's one of our patrons. If you'd like to join our patrons for the cost of a cup of coffee, a nice sort of high street fancy cup of coffee each month, for the cost of that you can help support this podcast. And we're really trying to develop the community, trying to develop the website more, and it really does need your help if we're going to make it together, because it's a community thing, it's a joint thing. I might be the voice on the stick, but without you, without your support, without you being there and downloading, listening, sending your mails and your pictures, it would just be silence, wouldn't it? So yeah, your support is so important. And you might think, well, £3 or £4 a month, Neil doesn't need that, he's got sponsorship. No, everything matters. And as we try to build the podcast, to do more walks and take it abroad as well, take it on the road, that's the thing I really want to do. I want to come to you where you are, so that we can spend some time together. So you can join the patrons, and of course we have our monthly Zoom meetup, and we have a photo challenge, and there's the More episode, which is on Saturdays. It's a shortish episode, some diary thoughts really, and a suggestion of a book that you might like to read or buy as well. So we do that on a Saturday, and I'll tell you at the end of the show, after our final song, the song that we play ourselves out with, what's on the show this week. Terry Horn's wonderful answers to the questions today. You can find those questions on the contact page. It was great to hear from you. Thank you, Terry, for teaching us, or me in particular. You probably knew about haiku. I know you did. It was just me being uncultured, wasn't it? Yeah. But it's nice to learn about new cultures. Eric with a K has perhaps helped us deal with IKEA trips, making them a mindful experience there. Bet you never associated shopping in the blue and yellow palace, which I love, with a mindfulness exercise. And finally, but not leastily, new word, Valerie Jardin. Great to learn more about her work this week, and I have no doubts that words from her appearances over the last couple of weeks will pop up during those inspirational clips we like to play out in future shows. So we're ending this week, actually, musically. You know, I like to have a song that we play out with as we continue to walk together and make our pictures together. I'm ending this week with some light blues, because this is the kind of thing that I have in my ears when I'm out not talking into this thing, but sometimes I take some music out with me, and this is the sort of thing that I've been listening to. And certainly when I'm making some pictures on the street, as I've started to do more of. It's been a very street-focused episode in places, so this seems an appropriate song to play out with. Here's Ain't Looking Back by Richard Farrell.
Got the feeling in your bones, make you feel right at home. Honey, does it well, keep me dancing till I'm dead. 'Cause I could run a mile like this, head over heels, feels like this. The sun has got me on my track, I ain't never looking back. I ain't looking voice will echo me no phone. Ruled by the laws above, nature shows me, makes me taught. I could climb this mountain now, rise above the clouds and see where all the falls that kept me strong. Never did I mean no wrong, 'cause I ain't looking back. I ain't looking back. Ain't looking, ooh, ain't looking back. Ain't looking, yeah. Ain't looking back. Ain't looking, ooh, ain't looking back. Ooh, ain't looking back. Ooh, ain't looking back. Ain't looking back. Ain't looking back. Ain't looking back.
Ain't Looking Back by Richard Farrell, and that is it for this week. Thank you to our guest Valerie Jardin and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And of course, if you are a patron, you get to hear the More Show through the Patreon app, which is very easy to download. And what will we be talking about? Well, a little more actually, about talking to strangers. I have, a wedding dilemma. Well, not so much me, it's more the couple. Well, it might be actually that, well, I tell you what, listen tomorrow and you'll find out. And Book Club has the, we have the intriguing title book, Two Blue Buckets, photographs by Peter Fraser. Now, I did remember about the sharing thing, so as much as it's nice to keep this show between you and I, if you get a chance today, please would you take a moment to share it in a suitable Facebook group that you're a part of. Maybe a photographic one would be ideal, of course, wouldn't it? Or through Twitter, or, well, I know you'll have an idea. Just grab the URL from the show page, which is linked to today in your player app, and share, and I'd really appreciate it. Next week on the show, I want to introduce you to a photographer called Phil Melia. Now, Phil is a commercial photographer, always with an eye for a good project. And let's be honest, that probably describes a fair few of us.
At the end of it, I thought, this is a complete stranger I've got some really nice portraits of. So I thought, well, that could be a project in itself to do in a short space of time, which was 7 days, 7 strangers, 7 portraits.
7 portraits, yeah. Music on the show from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time. Well, that's it for another week, Car. I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you. Right, what have I done wrong? Well, not so much a bone, but I think you're being a hypocrite. Why? Last week you said you couldn't take me on the Photowalk show because you had to save petrol. And then this week you're talking about going down to Kent to go and photograph in the sea or something. Well, yeah, but I'm kind of halfway there. Because today, as people are listening to this show, if you're listening on the Friday, I'm actually going to be photographing a wedding, which is almost, well, 2/3, maybe just a tad more, towards where I need to be for going on that boat. Smart planning, I see. Wasn't really planned that way, it was more of a coincidence, but don't tell anybody. Anyway, I think you should play your outtake. Not my brightest moment. Go on, tell them. I was trying to get around the horses field, and I thought I found a clever way to do it. And it involved a sort of it was a handle. I thought the handle, it was plastic. I thought the handle would be safe. But somehow I managed to touch the electrics. Very funny. Yeah, I'm not really sure what I think about horses, but I'm going to try and get through this field. He's beautiful. He's sort of, what would you call that brown? Light brown. Oh, you're not doing it very much justice. Let's just move this. Ah! Ow! I didn't think that was electric. Oh, ow. Hang on, let me get my thoughts back.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.